Okay, if you're new to this channel, my name is Jason, and I'm an American. I'm currently living in Moscow. I don't know how much longer I'll be here. Because of what's going on, I imagine once any open hostility starts between the West and Russia, at that point I'll probably have to leave this country, more than likely. So I'm trying to put out as much as I can before I leave here, because when I leave here, I have no idea where I'm going to go. At the moment, I am not going back to the United States, not with what I know about the place now. So I'm trying to do some of this with the information that I've got at the moment before I leave, and I'm trying to put as much content up as I can. Okay, so what I want to discuss in this video is what's going on right now, what you see on the screen. What is this conflict between, potential conflict between Russia and the Ukraine? What does this have to do with these two guys right here, in particular this one? How do they fit into all of this? I promise you, if you have a little bit of patience, you're gonna probably look at this conflict in a whole new way once you're done listening to this video. The reason you'll look at it in the new way is because it's what they're not telling you in the news that I'm going to tell you is really going on and what this is all about. I want you to first understand my personal opinion on this is Vladimir Putin. He is caught in a situation that he can't win. And he knows it himself. And, unfortunately, I don't know, when you corner somebody, that's dangerous, when you do things like that, you're unpredictable. This is the first time that I've seen Vladimir Putin in the 20 years that I've paid attention to him, at least. First time I've seen him a little bit, a little bit unnerved, yeah? And there's a good reason why, because he understands what's being done to him, and he knows why it's being done to him. And he recently said, this was just a few hours ago, and Vladimir Putin is now telling us what I knew the whole time, that he understands that he's being tricked into a war right now. He's being lured, let's put it that way. That's why he hasn't responded up to this point. He was content with leaving the Ukraine as it was up until some recent things, and I will explain to you what those recent things are. And he understands why this is being done to him. This is, let me put it to you this way. The consequences of this conflict and the outcome of it, it's global. It's not simply something that's going to affect Russia or the Ukraine, and I'm going to tell you shortly why. And again, I'm going to tell you what this has to do with Elon Musk and what this has to do with the United States specifically.
США вышли из договора по противоракетной обороне.
Russian President Vladimir Putin accused the U.S. and its Western allies on Tuesday of ignoring Russia's security concerns and deliberately creating a scenario designed to lure Russia into war.
Но уже сейчас
We already can see that fundamental Russian concerns were ignored.
Russia is demanding that NATO halt any further enlargement, bar Ukraine from ever joining the alliance, and pull back forces and weaponry from Eastern European countries.
So he makes it clear that part of his concerns aren't simply Ukraine not joining NATO. He mentions the weaponry as well. And at this point, it's less the troops that are being stationed there than the weaponry that they're bringing with them. And this is what has pushed this situation that we're currently dealing with into overdrive, if you will. I'm going to show you what that is right now. This is the situation that Putin's really concerned about right here. This was back on October. This is why everything started in November. The buildup started there on the border. This is my opinion. The Ukraine, at that point, had apparently agreed in a deal with Turkey, as you see here, to produce the drones that the Ukraine had previously been using against Russian forces that it had bought from Turkey, to begin producing them in a factory they were going to build outside of the capital in a city known as Lvov. Yeah? Anyways, you can see the headline here. Ukraine to produce Turkish-armed drones. The Ukraine has previously used the Turkish-armed drones against pro-Russian separatists in the country in the east. Ukraine said it will build a factory to produce Turkish-armed drones. Kiev previously bought to use against pro-Russian separatists in the east, a deal that might upset Kiev's adversary, Moscow. And it definitely did upset him. Let me give you a little background on Ukraine using these drones.
As Russia builds up its forces near the Ukrainian border, Turkey is continuing to supply Ukraine with newly developed armed drones.
Turkey is not happy about Russian expansion. Turkey is not happy that Russia is flexing its muscles in the former Soviet space, and it's particularly being supportive of Ukraine.
From Libya to Syria, Turkish drones, or unmanned air vehicles, also known as UAVs, have quickly gained a reputation as being cheap and effective. The drones drew world attention in 2020 after playing a key role in Azerbaijan's defeat of Armenian-backed forces in the disputed Nagorno-Karabakh enclave. But in Ukraine, they would face a far more formidable challenge from Russian forces.
That increased morale not only in the Ukrainian army, but also in the general public, and showed that yes, Ukrainians can resist, can defend themselves from Russian invasion in Donbass.
Russia was quick to condemn Ukraine's use of Turkish drones.
So, as you see from that video, the drones are pretty effective, at least they were this past year, in their use. They're in the Azerbaijan conflict, and apparently they've been used in a limited role in the Ukraine over, I guess, the past few years. But the Ukraine was having to buy them all from Turkey, and I'm guessing, that they didn't have nearly as many as they would need to deal with the Russian army. And this led to the development of the business deal between Turkey and the Ukraine to build this drone factory. However, I believe this has all been part of the plan. The whole time, what they, apparently were doing, it's very clear when you look at a map. They began encircling Russia. Traditionally, Russia had this barrier here, which was the Carpathian mountain range that kept most of its enemies out, and, it would force them into this narrow corridor right up here through the Baltics. If you wanted to invade with armor, for example, you'd have to go up here, and, invading anywhere else would be really difficult. Well, the Ukraine is on the other side of those mountains, and it's flat terrain. I know the place pretty well. I used to work there in Kiev. I lived in the Ukraine for a little while. I've lived all over the CIS and worked all over the former Soviet republics. I managed project for a aerospace technology company, we'll put it that way, at airports years ago. And I had a lot of airports from basically stretching from up here in Estonia, all the way down to Central Asia, Russia and the Ukraine, so on. So Belarus, I know the places pretty well is what I'm getting at here. And the Ukraine, it's flat, open terrain straight to Moscow, pretty much. And, that's always, obviously in the past, been pro-Russian prior to 2014. So Russia really had nothing to worry about. It has a huge border here, but it only needed to be worried with protecting this little corridor, basically where you see the U.S. or NATO positions now, Estonia and Latvia. And Russia was content with that. So the bottom line is the Russian military was content with dealing with NATO here on its border. and keeping, the buffer of Belarusia between it and Ukraine, between it and Poland, and it didn't really have a lot to worry about. Yeah. So what changed is in 2014, apparently, when they did the color revolution, that led to problems, and Ukraine, began, strongly leaning west, and, Putin knew what this was all about. And again, you've seen them, the Russian Putin sent forces down to the Ukraine, and he got what was really concerning to him, which was the seaport here in the Crimea. That's why he annexed the place. It was so basically, the West couldn't use ships, right, to bring in tanks and heavy military equipment nearly as easy. It was going to limit them to, ports over here in Odessa, right? And so he was really concerned with that, getting the Crimean base annexed. And that's what he did. And he was pretty stagnant after that. The lines, there's been a low-grade, or I guess low-intensity conflict for, years now in the area, but nothing, major went on. And what I'm pointing out here is, so what changed? Well, this is what changed. Back in 2017, in September, there were some headlines made that Elon Musk and Vladimir Putin, were both commenting that whoever masters AI will run the world. Musk made another announcement during this time, and he said, if I'm not mistaken, Elon Musk says AI could lead to a third world war. And this was his tweet from September 4th, 2017. He said, China, Russia, soon all countries with strong computer science, competition for AI superiority at the national level, most likely cause of World War III, in my opinion. Well, that kind of stuff terrifies people like Elon Musk and this guy, Peter Thiel, because these two guys are like rabid, pro-libertarian, pro-American people, and they really don't want to see China, or especially Russia, develop this AI first. Well, Putin knows this as well. So here's Putin. Back in 2019.
Масштабный рывок. В России подготовили профильную национальную стратегию. В мире идет борьба за технологическое лидерство.
Если кто-то сможет обеспечить монополию в сфере искусственного интеллекта, последствия нам всем понятны. Тот станет властелином мира.
Now, I want you to listen to that statement one more time he made in June of 2019. Listen to what Putin says.
Последствия нам всем понятны. Тот станет властелином мира.
Whoever develops and has the monopoly on this technology, he'll become the ruler of the world. Putin's not dumb, and he knew this. And I'm going to show you what they were doing in Russia the whole time.
Стоимость доступа в сеть одна из самых низких в мире, сильная научная школа, лидерство в математике, физике на протяжении десятилетий. В этой школе нет учителей, все задания выдает компьютер, не найти расписание, каждый занимается в своем темпе, и главное, никогда не звенит звонок, ведь открыта школа круглосуточно. Более того, заниматься можно.
So basically what they did is they started a school, schools, I'm guessing plural maybe, in Russia to get the best and the brightest. This is no laughing thing for you guys that don't know any better. Russia is not some backward country with a bunch of stupid people, right? For those of you who don't know, you have your periodic table, from a Russian, some of the, top names in physics and mathematics over, the past decades, they come from Russia, or what was the Soviet Union. The United States defected a lot, defected quite a few Russian physicists, apparently, during the Cold War, over to us, or over to the United States. And, for example, things like the Fields Medal in math it's almost always a Russian that wins it. So what I'm getting at here is the brain power, yeah, which that's what we're talking about here, the brain power behind developing the AI. You know, Russia wasn't deficient in, you know, though it's half the size of the United States, you know, it made up for it in the brain power, right? And he was very serious about this. And what Putin could do was something that no U.S. president could do legally, yeah, in the United States. Putin, acting in the West, is what they call him, a dictator. Putin can set policy at his level that pretty much forces the rest of the industries in Russia to get behind whatever initiative it is. So he had the power of the Russian, country, the whole Russian nation, basically, to develop this AI. And I mean, with that in mind, compared to how messed up things are in the United States, when you try to get something done from the government, it's made in America very difficult for the government to, take blanket policies like Putin can do, for example, and actually implement them, force private industry and so on, to make it happen. Putin could do that. So he was at an advantage to the race to develop AI over the United States. So you heard him in his own words say that whoever develops this technology is going to have has the monopoly on this technology that develops it will be, and he says, he'll be the ruler of the world. Well, he knows who he's talking to, yeah? He's talking to guys like this right here. These two guys, yeah? Elon Musk and Peter Thiel. More specifically, Elon Musk, yeah? He's talking to him, and Musk knows that he's talking to him as well. Musk is simply a front for the U.S. government. That's what it boils down to. Putin understands this. Other people in Russia understand this. I'll show you shortly what their concerns are. That's who that statement was directed at by Putin, is what I'm getting at. Putin knows. And so does Elon Musk. And that's one of the reasons back in February that, Elon Musk tweeted out,
it may seem like an unlikely invitation, but the Kremlin suggests Vladimir Putin might actually be open to a social media chat with Elon Musk. The CEO of Tesla and SpaceX used Twitter to invite Mr. Putin to join him in a conversation on Clubhouse, an audio-only app. The Kremlin calls it interesting, and actually they say they want to hear more. I'm joined now by CNN business reporter Paul LaMonica. So
Putin knows what Elon Musk is actually up to. The rest of the world may not, but Putin does. Yeah, these two guys have been competing against each other, yeah, since 2017. And if you keep in mind, 2017 is when we started getting stories like this. You'll see in Newsweek, a top U.S. general says the United States, or tells his Marines basically, that they should prepare for a big war with Russia. This was in December of 2017. You also had a lot of other unusual stuff take place during that time, like, the whole, I'll mention this now, the whole UFO disclosure thing started right there in December of 2017. Yeah. There's a reason that's been done as well. Remember, they've got to have a way to turn everything off. When you start something that could lead, to nuclear war, you got to have a way to turn it off. And, you need stories to get people to stop fighting. And this is one of them, in my opinion. But nevertheless, this all started back in 2017. And, you had the cryptic statement made by Donald Trump in October of 2017. So exactly a month, 1 month to the date after, September 5th, the date this was published, when Putin and Musk were, I guess, reading each other's comments, and Musk made, the comment that whoever, developed this AI, it could lead to a third world war. Well, exactly 1 month after that, you had this whole calm before the storm statement made by Trump. And here it is.
You guys know what this represents? Maybe just the calm before the storm.
What's the storming?
Could be the calm before the storm.
What storm is
We have the world's great military people in this room, I will tell you that. And we're going to have a great evening. Thank you all for coming. Thank you.
What storm?
So, as you can see there, I can't prove, for example, that that's what Trump was referencing, but it seems pretty clear now, looking back on it, that what you had started was public comments between the Front for the United States, which is Elon Musk, and SpaceX, and Tesla and all that. I mean, it's all funded pretty much, or the starting of these companies were heavily funded by the U.S. government. Sweetheart loans, and I'll show you something in a second so you understand it's not just me saying that it's Russia saying that as well. But nevertheless, they made the comments in September of 2017. Putin said, whoever masters AI will run the world, and Musk responded with saying, AI could lead to a third world war. Putin saying that he's being pushed into this conflict is, he's not lying. He's telling the truth. It's exactly what's going on. They're pushing him into this conflict. From TASS, this is the Russian news agency. So this is dated now shortly before October. Yeah. The Ukraine said it had struck a deal with Turkey to start producing some of those Turkish drones that were so deadly, in the Azerbaijan conflict, and Ukraine had used in a limited role against Russian armor. See, the Russians aren't worried so much about the javelins, they're more worried about these drones, and I'll show you shortly why, and what this has to do with Musk, Starlink, and all of that. But right now, here is from the mouth of the head of the Russian space agency. Again, this is, Putin's mouth for, his space and defense programs that involve space. So, Dmitry Rogozin, this is what he said on October 7th, 2021. So just a few months ago, matter of fact, 1 month before the buildup started, to, the Russian buildup there on the Ukrainian border. 1 month before that started, 7th of October, 2021. Rogozin says, Starlink satellites can be used to change flight path of missiles. Roscosmos chief. This is why Putin is directing those comments at Musk. According to Rogozin, Starlink can be used to deliver purely political and most likely anti-Russian content directly to mobile phones. See? So, Roscosmos Director General Dmitry Rogozin believes the Starlink satellites launched by Elon Musk company SpaceX can be used for military purposes in the future, including for changing the flight path of cruise missiles and managing spy works. This is a quote from Rogozin. This year, SpaceX received $900 million in state subsidies. He's talking about the federal government, is what he's talking about, which they funded they backed these sweetheart loans to SpaceX since the beginning. I was finishing up my education at the University of Florida in aerospace engineering. At the time, SpaceX was getting off the ground, and I never thought it would work. When people were acting like Elon Musk was the greatest thing since sliced bread, I was reminding them that, he's not doing this all himself. He is getting really good deals from the federal government in all of these loans. So it appears that they're backing them. I had no idea at the time that it was going to lead to this. So anyways, Rogozin says this year, SpaceX received about $900 million in state subsidies. The entire subsidy for the forthcoming period is $20 billion. So a question arises, why would the government do that? And the answer is, those spacecraft provide internet connection. They can become a platform for steering cruise missiles, for changing their flight paths when they're already in flight. They can also be used for sending orders to special forces networks of agents. According to Rogozin, Starlink can also be used to deliver purely political and most likely anti-Russian content directly to mobile phones. Rogozin went on to say that by now, about 1,800 Starlink satellites were delivered into orbit. The next stage of the project involves the launch of 17,000 spacecraft. Eventually, Starlink's orbital constellation will comprise about 42,000 satellites. Rogozin finishes, "We won't just sit and wait, of course. We have our own project. It was presented to the president earlier this year, and we plan to orbit hundreds of our own satellites to protect our sovereignty." Well, they don't plan on doing that, by the way. He doesn't mention a date. That won't get underway until 2024, according to what I've read. So now you might understand this whole conversation back in February of 2021 that Elon Musk, had with Putin, Vladimir Putin, privately, and why Putin responded. You see, this right here, Elon Musk, you're looking at an NGO. Yeah, so, a non-governmental organization that is acting on behalf, in my opinion, for groups within the United States. Putin understands this, and he understands his main competitor is, the United States, and that the United States could never, do, again, what he does politically because of the U.S., because of the way of government in the U.S. So, the U.S. puts somebody like Elon Musk and this guy, Peter Thiel, up. So I guess what you're probably wondering what that has to do with, AI, for example, right? Well, it's got to do with this. 2 years prior to Putin and Musk making those statements in 2017, Elon Musk, along with some other people on his side, most likely with the nod of the U.S. government, started this company called OpenAI. And as you see, it's an artificial intelligence research laboratory consisting of for-profit corporation OpenAI and its parent company, the nonprofit OpenAI Inc. The company, considered a competitor, DeepMind, conducts research in the field of AI with the slated goal of promoting and developing friendly AI in a way that benefits humanity as a whole. In other words, that cryptic statement that, Elon Musk and, what was her name, Grimes, I believe, their baby, that they said their baby's name actually translates into like love AI or love artificial intelligence. Well, and they attached like the baby's name was made up of like, I think the SR or the A12, I believe that's what it was, which was the predecessor to the SR-71. It was a top secret, top secret Lockheed Martin spy plane project, right? And, Elon Musk and Grimes, they were making the comments about, well, our baby's name, we like it because it's, it was called the Archangel, the A-12 Archangel or whatever, and it's this top secret spy plane, right? So they're letting these little cryptic statements out, and I personally believe that what they were doing there was letting the world know, some people at least in the world know cryptically, that whatever this thing is, this love AI or this friendly AI, this what I would call libertarian AI that they developed, they probably think it works, or they have something, is what I'm getting at, and that's what my personal belief is behind that little cryptic statement. Anyways, these guys were all working together on this since 2015. Now, Musk resigned from that company in 2018 in February, but he remained a donor. So whatever he was doing there, more than likely, from what's discussed later in this article, in Wiki at least here, he resigned for potential conflicts, because he was developing AI on his own over there, right? So the bottom line is you had Musk and, you had Peter Thiel right here, these two guys. They call them, again, the PayPal Mafia, is what they're actually referred to by some people. Nevertheless, Musk and Thiel, these guys were working for AI, or these guys were working on smart AI behind the scenes. Peter Thiel, this is his company, PALINTIR, and PALINTIR has been used, for pattern recognition and basically a type of AI for quite a while by the United States and specifically by the U.S. military. Peter Thiel is a rabid pro-American guy, and his biggest concern is China. Yeah, he's afraid that China and, Google working with China is developing AI that's going to, basically take over the world. And, he recently came out and made statements that China was using Bitcoin to manipulate the US dollar, and, we needed to do something about it. So he's offering his services as well, much like Musk, to try to save the US, right? So this guy over here, developed apparently this company, PALINTIR, using types of AI. According to Mark Bowden in the book Zero Dark 30, Peter Thiel's PALINTIR, the AI was used to discover the patterns, I don't know how, through, I guess, phone conversations, emails, whatever patterns, that wound up locating Osama bin Laden in his hideout. They called it the killer app. So, according to Mark Bowden, it was PALINTIR and Peter Thiel who's responsible for finding, or Peter Thiel's company, AI, responsible for finding Osama bin Laden, for tracking him down. PALINTIR was also used during this COVID-19 pandemic. They used the software to track at the spread of the virus, and they also used a separate package they named Tiberius, interestingly enough, to deliver the second doses of the COVID-19 vaccine. This was all for the Department of Defense, and it was a Department of Defense run project by Peter Thiel. So I'm getting back to a point here. Vladimir Putin, he understands these two guys right here, Musk and Thiel, but more importantly, Musk, are his main competitors, because what they're going to do is independent, by and large, of the U.S. government, though they're acting on behalf of groups within the U.S. government. So Putin knows who he's talking to, and, he's just not mentioned it openly yet. But that's what this is all about. So why the concern about Musk and, for example, the Ukraine, the drone factory opening up, all of this stuff? What has Putin so worried? Well, he's got a huge army of tanks. Yeah. And that's what the Russian military has relied on in the past for its conventional security, outside of the nuclear deterrent, right, was its tank force. And, it has one of the largest in Europe. It's not one of the largest. It is, I guess, the largest single country with number of tanks in Europe. But nevertheless, Russia's relied on, its tank force, good tanks, and, its air support, for these tanks, much like the United States, as a deterrent conventionally. So what has Putin so worried, and why is this drone factory in the Ukraine that Turkey and the Ukraine announced in October that they were going to do? Why is this the trigger, most likely? And what does this have to do with Elon Musk and Putin and the race for AI and all of that stuff, Starlink and everything else? Well, here, this is a U.S. Army announced drone swarm plan. I'm going to show you what they had been planning for a while and why it makes Putin's military obsolete.
Project. The cluster swarm would be far more powerful than the existing CBU-105 cans of WAPAS for two reasons. A CBU-105 can only hit targets in an area a few hundred meters across. The cluster swarm can go hunting for vehicles dispersed over many square miles. The other advantage is efficiency. CBU-105 gives little overlap in search area for each warhead. Many will not have a target, and where there is overlap, two or more may attack the same tank and ignore others. A true swarm acting cooperatively will deconflict, so 40 drones always attack 40 different targets. If cluster swarm drones have EFP warheads similar to existing weapons, then each MLRS missile would release about 10 drones. Each M270 MLRS vehicle fires 12 missiles in a salvo, for 120 drones. So a battery of 9 launch vehicles would deliver 1,000 killer drones over the target area, enough in theory to stop an entire armored division in its tracks. Would such a swarm constitute a WMD?
So there you have it. That is what actually has Putin worried right there, are these smart AI swarms. And obviously, if you're putting a factory in the Ukraine to start producing Turkish drones, I'm not saying they're the same Switchblade drones. What I'm saying is, they can, if they can produce the Turkish drones, they're going to be able to produce these as well if they need to. Putin understands that's a threat, and it's a big threat to his military, and it's going to make it very difficult for him to invade and hold ground in the Ukraine if the Ukraine stockpiles enough of these drones. That is the bait, in other words, that was set, that Putin doesn't want to take. And I'm going to explain to you why he doesn't want to take this and what it has to do with the drone swarm that you just seen that the U.S. Army is developing. Now, the bait that has been set was the factory that, the Ukraine announced it would open. I think Putin's probably smart enough to know that, they're not gonna, this isn't gonna happen, in other words. He understands that was the bait to lure him in. He doesn't want that factory there. He doesn't want the Ukraine to be able to produce that, large numbers of these killer drones, for example, that could make his army obsolete. So why hasn't he invaded already is, I guess, what I'm getting at here. And this is why. And why did he say he's being lured into a war? Well, this is why. Let me show you guys.
On the engine.
Okay, what you just seen was two vertical landing rockets. There, I believe that one may have been either in Texas or Kennedy. I'm not sure where the landings took place, for the National Geographic special. That's what Elon Musk has used to put all of those satellites up in the air. This was not a new idea. It wasn't a new concept. It wasn't something that Elon Musk innovated and came up with himself. I'm going to explain this to you really simple. This was developed in the 1980s and 90s in the United States under the Strategic Defense Initiative organization. It was a department out of the Pentagon, that was tasked with building a global missile shield, against the Soviet Union's ICBMs. Part of that program required the Pentagon launching thousands, or the United States launching thousands of these satellites into orbit that would be used as part of this network to track and potentially shoot down, or as you've seen the Russian space chief say, change the directions of cruise missiles, this type of stuff. Thousands of these satellites needed to be launched, and they needed to be launched pretty fast within a short period of time. And the only way they could see feasibly to do that with the infrastructure we had was developing some type of reusable rocket. Well, that was the ground floor right there, and they developed these reusable rockets back in the 90s, and the program was slowly defunded by the time Clinton came into office, and with the Cold War ending, and Russia being run by Yeltsin, who nobody had a problem with apparently. The need for this, missile shield, kind of disappeared. At least within the broader view of the United States. So the SDIO office was kind of shut down, and this is what I believe personally. I believe during this time, that possibly, and this is a possible, That X there, is very telling to me. The X thing always sticks out. Project X, if you guys dig into what X, the history behind it all means, it's sinister. Yeah. And I'm not saying that, anybody from the Pentagon picked these two guys back in 2000 to do, PayPal or what they called Bank X, but I'm not saying it didn't happen either. I don't know. It's just highly suspicious. Let's put it that way. Highly suspicious that these two people in particular started this company and, picked a name like Bank X, for example, to do this. It's weird. Nevertheless, these guys, are back again on the scene 20 years later almost, with the AI and the Starlink and the SpaceX and all of that, and using military technology from the 90s basically to deploy his satellite constellations. And I'm going to show you what they're going to tell you. He lands a lot of these things on drone barges. And this young lady is going to explain to you why.
Are lit in a series of burns that get the vehicle in the right position for entering Earth's atmosphere and landing. Different landings require different amounts of fuel to pull off. It's because the Falcon 9 doesn't launch straight upward, but follows a curved path up and away from the launch pad. For a ground landing, the rocket needs extra fuel to slow down on that arc, completely flip around, and then retread all the horizontal and vertical distance it has covered to make it back to solid ground. But for ocean landings, the drone ship can position itself downrange of the rocket or in the ideal place to catch the vehicle on a more natural path back to Earth. That decreases the distance the rocket needs to travel and the amount of fuel needed to maneuver the Falcon 9 for landing.
So you just heard that it's actually easier, for them to send the, rocket out and have it land somewhere else than to make it actually fly back to where it took off from. It requires less fuel. So what I'm getting at is it's even easier for them to send it somewhere else in the world and land it over there, for example. So what does that have to do with this killer drone swarm and, all of this? Well, I'm going to show you right now. Here was announced when? October 13th, 2020. So about a year and a half ago, it was announced that on Warzone, the military's puzzling plan to have SpaceX deliver a C-17 worth of cargo anywhere in an hour updated. This is what the program involved, Pentagon wants to use private rockets like SpaceX Starship to deliver cargo around the world. Well, that cargo they're going to deliver around the world, they're calling it rocket cargo. What that cargo really will be, most likely, what the plan really is a C-17 is a gigantic aircraft. When we watched this video over here on the killer drones,
the cluster swarm would be far more powerful than the existing CBU-105 cans of whoop-ass for two reasons. A CBU-105 can only hit targets in an area a few hundred meters across. The cluster swarm can go hunting for vehicles dispersed over many square miles. The other advantage is efficiency. A true swarm acting cooperatively will deconflict, so 40 drones always attack 40 different targets. If cluster swarm drones have EFP warheads similar to existing weapons, then each MLRS missile would release about 10 drones. Each M270 MLRS vehicle fires 12 missiles in a salvo, for 120 drones. So a battery of 9 launch vehicles would deliver 1,000 killer drones over the target area, enough in theory to stop an entire armored division in its tracks.
So there you have again them telling you one of these, just 9 of these, vehicles, right? Launching those killer drones in theory, could have the power, just 9 vehicles, to stop an entire armored division. That's hundreds and hundreds of tanks, hundreds and hundreds of, these things right here that Vladimir Putin's been relying on. They're worthless in a conflict like this is describing. Matter of fact, they're less than worthless. They're actually a liability. If you've spent all of your money and you've relied strictly on these things, for your security, well, In a conflict like that, they're worthless. So let me back up here and give you a quick history lesson. Yeah. This is the proximity fuse. It was developed in World War II, under the, office of Vannevar Bush, that developed also the atomic bomb and every, other thing that was developed by them during the war, radar, all of that stuff. But specifically this was the proximity fuse. And it was revolutionary at the time. It was the, killer drone of its day. They placed it on top of artillery, and it started, its first uses were actually anti-aircraft artillery, and it was by the Navy. They were the ones who got it first, and it was used in force at the at a big naval battle against a bunch of kamikazes in the Marianas. And I can't remember, they had like a 7-to-1 kill ratio or something. I mean, it was incredible. And they called it the Marianas Turkey Shoot. That's what it was called, because it effectively, wiped out the Japanese Air Force there in that battle with just these anti-aircraft shells that had the proximity fuse in it. And what these things did is, as you can see right here on the tip, they'd send a signal. This one was a radio signal out. They'd send a signal out, and when the signal hit something, it hit something solid, it would bounce the signal back to the shell. And they would have the shell timed that after the signal was bounced back to them, the shell would detonate within a short period of time. So in other words, you got like maximum effect of shrapnel, and you could block out a large portion of the sky, with this type of artillery. Well, it was used a little later in land warfare near the end of the war in the 40s, and I will show you that. It was used right here. After Eisenhower demanded that he be allowed to use the fuses, 200,000 shells with VT fuses, codenamed Posit, were used in the Battle of the Bulge in 1944. They made Allied heavy artillery far more devastating, as all the shells now exploded just before hitting the ground. The German divisions were caught out in the open, and the U.S. General George Patton credited the introduction of the proximity fuses with saving Liege and stated that their use required a revision of the tactics of land warfare. This was like the machine gun being developed almost. In the words of the U.S. Army General George S. Patton, this is his words, and I quote, "The new shell with the funny fuse is devastating. I think that when all the armies get this shell, we will have to devise some new method of warfare. I am glad you all thought of it first." Detonation fuses either ran on a timer or exploded when the shell hit an object. In other words, they exploded when they hit the ground. And a ground burst, right? Not an air burst. But the ineffectiveness of such fire was notorious. World War II naval gunners often needed hundreds of rounds of ammunition to hit one fast-moving plane. Well, see, that all changed when they introduced the proximity fuse. And what I'm getting at here is this was a warfare changer. Basically, it was no longer possible for large formations of soldiers, in Europe at that time to move, without, it was more devastating than the machine gun, is what I'm getting at here. If they tried to move in mass and they got caught out in the open, even without accurate spotters, the proximity fuse allowed the shells that were being fired at them, what's known as like indirect fire, I guess, indirect artillery fire. They could just basically blanket an entire area, and you could, I guess, scratch entire grids off of a map, when you fired indirect fire with proximity timed shells into it. So that was development during World War II that, near the end, as Patton said, changed the way you were going to have to fight land warfare. Well, the same thing is going on right now with these drones. Yeah, the drone swarms mean these type of things, tank formations, are a thing of the past. And Putin knew this. Putin knew it back in 2017. This is what his cryptic statements about whoever controls AI is going to rule the world. Because it means AI is going to be able to run these drone swarms faster and better than anybody else's AI. Yeah. And, you'll be able to pretty much make armies like this worthless. Yeah. That's what it's all about. I just showed you the U.S. government's plan to rocket cargo, rocket cargo, yeah, C-17s loads of cargo anywhere in the world. Well, what do you think they're going to be deploying out of these ships, right? These rocket ships that they'll be landing, for example. Here's your answer. Things just like this. The General Dynamics Land System TRX, it can launch 50 of those Switchblade suicide drones. So obviously, if you've got rockets, big rockets that can land huge amounts of cargo, they can let these little drones, these little drone tanks, right, drone launchers out, yeah, they can deploy them. Just like Rogozin said, the Starlink satellites can be used to change flight path of missiles. Well, guess what else the Starlink satellites can also be used for? They can be used to control things like this, yeah? These autonomous drones, the AI, you can have AI, smart AI, managing smaller autonomous AI units like this. That's what this is all about, guys. That's what Putin's so scared about. And that's why he really doesn't want to take the bait in the Ukraine, because I think he's worried that they already have planned on this. And when you have, you know, a few of these SpaceX drone ships, if that's what you want to call them, land and deploy, you know, robot armies on your border within an hour, and those drone swarms can take out, you know, entire armored divisions, well, Putin knows it's checkmate. And he doesn't want to do anything now until he's got the ability to respond back with his own systems, right? That's what this is all about. It's what's going on at the moment. And he knows he's being provoked, so the second he moves, the United States can come in with SpaceX, with organizations like SpaceX, and they can pretty much annihilate, you know, the Russian land forces quickly, decisively, and they can force Putin to capitulate. You know, that's what this boils down to. He doesn't want that to happen. He doesn't want to look like the bad guy. So he was content with, you know, biding his time and, you know, in this race with Musk. Well, again, it was the drone factory that the Ukraine decided it was going to open up with Turkey back in October that really pushes him over the edge, because he knows he can't allow that to take place. So if he allows the Ukraine to start producing this type of stuff, well, you know, it's game over for him anyways. Without SpaceX and Elon Musk in the United States, the Ukraine would be able to, you know, buffer him, is what I'm getting at, from the West. So, you know, the bottom line is he's in a real bad position, and this is what's so terrifying, because when people get cornered, yeah, just like animals, they tend to get scared and they tend to act irrationally. And I've never, you know, over the years of watching Putin, I've never seen him do anything, you know, irrational in the past. On the world stage, at least, everything he did was very calm and cool and calculated. Even the invasion of Georgia that went on back in 2008, you know, it was, you know, he knew exactly what he was doing then, and that's why he pulled it off at the Olympics at that time. He wanted it to be that way. This one, on the other hand, this one has me a little bit concerned, because the things he's saying now seem like the words coming from a very nervous person. And these people, what I'm getting at, the leaders in the world, what I'm trying to get at here, these people, they have the power to lie, firstly, and murder, secondly. That's what power Satan has, you know, and Satan is just the spirit of this world. It's not a supernatural being. It's the spirit that people like Vladimir Putin and people like president of any country have to obey if they want to be president. That's who they have to worship, you know. They have to worship the devil. They have to do bad things. They have to lie. They have to cheat. They have to steal. They have to kill. They have to do all kinds of, like, awful stuff and disobey God in order to be the king. Now, is it saying that God's not in control of everything? No, God's in control of everything. There was no king on earth that's here that God isn't allowing to be there. That does not mean that they're God's kings on earth, however. It just means that God allows them to be king. That's what Romans 13 is all about in the Bible. Satan is just the sword. You know, it's the sword to punish That's part of what Satan is, at least. It's the sword to punish evildoers, right? So you have an evil, like, punishment, which is death or murder, done by men that are willing to carry it out, and God puts them in charge to kind of keep order. When I say God puts them in charge, he lets them be in charge to kind of keep things ordered. The problem is when they start attacking each other. And, there is always that fight amongst them in the kingdom, who wants to be first, right? Satan has his kingdom, and it's, the kings that are on this earth right now, they're ruling over it, and, they're always wanting to be, the one on top, one up each other, right? This is why Jesus warned people about not desiring to be first in his kingdom. If you're wanting to be first in his kingdom, you put yourself last. That's the contrast between Jesus' kingdom, God's kingdom, and Satan's kingdom. Satan's kingdom, there's always competition to be first, right? And to do it by, the works of your hand and the means of the world, which is, like I said, disobedience to God.